Hey, how is it going, everybody? And welcome to Ep.2 of the KRV Sports Podcast. Big day in the football world today as another potential Hall of Fame player in Luke Kuechly decided to hang up his cleats and call it a career. Just to give a little bit of a backstory again, I have a poster of this guy on my wall right now. I have his jersey hanging in my closet right now. I'm a big Panthers fan, but I'm definitely a big Luke Kuechly fan, so it is a bummer to see him kind of step away from the game. The guy was only 28 years old. He's 3 years older than me and just retired. Must be nice, but I was pretty surprised to see this because Luke Kuechly was still under contract for I believe 2 more years. So this was kind of out of the blue. I was a little confused, a little bit, I guess you could say miffed. You know what I mean? A little puzzled as to why he decided to announce his retirement. But then I watched his retirement announcement video. And when you are watching that video, like I'm a big sports fan, right? I almost came to tears because when you're watching that video, right? You're watching a man who is literally sitting in front of a camera trying to tell you that he can't do what he loves to do at 100% anymore, right? He pretty much came out and said, I've been playing football at, such a high level. I don't feel like I'm able to give my 100% anymore. The guy is completely like pouring his heart out as to why and how much he wants to keep playing. The guy wants to keep playing, and he just is saying that his body is just not allowing it to happen, to let him play at least at 100%. So, after watching that, it's especially with the whole Andrew Luck thing, it's really kind of ushering in this whole new mentality of the sport of football, which I think is a really good thing. And I think it's just kind of the realistic side of things, you know what I mean? I think a lot of these football players get so caught up in their legacies, you know what I mean? Like, have they won a ring or not? Have they won this award or not? How many of these awards do they have? They get so caught up in their pride, in their achievements, in their legacy, in their career, that they really kind of put themselves and their health and their mental health kind of on the back burner, it seems like. And I know I'm kind of like an outside source. I'm not a football player. I've never played football at some elite level, so I wouldn't know, you know what I mean? But it's like, I have an article from the Science Daily right in front of me, and I'm just going to go ahead and read like the very first paragraph in this study, and it says, in a sample of 266 deceased former amateur and professional football players, the study found that the risk of developing CTE increased by 30% per year played. So 30% increase per year played, meaning that for each 2.6 additional years of football played, the odds of developing CTE doubled. Among those with CTE, for each additional 5.3 years played, the odds of developing severe CTE doubled. So just kind of put that into perspective, right? Luke Kuechly has 2 years left on his contract. In those 2 years, he has statistically a double chance of developing CTE in the brain, right? And it's like, when you're looking at those numbers, you're kind of putting these things into perspective. It makes a whole lot more sense why a player of a prime potential Hall of Fame player like Luke Kuechly would decide to hang up the cleats. Like I mentioned earlier, we saw the same thing kind of happen with Andrew Luck. It's the beginning of the season, you know what I mean? The Colts looked good, you know what I mean? Nobody's expecting their franchise star quarterback to hang up the cleats, but he kind of had the same message. Once you kind of put things into perspective, there's a lot more things important out there than football and your legacy, you know what I mean? And these guys are set, right? These guys aren't exactly like quitting their jobs and, going on unemployment to go and look for something in the paper. These guys are set. These are people that went into their football, they made it, you know what I mean? They made it their livelihood, they made a lot of money off of it, and they're walking away with a bunch of money, a bunch of connections in the league. So if you have all of that, what's the point in really risking your body, you know what I mean, more than you already have for a legacy? And I know, it's easy to say that, but at the same time, I'm sure if you're in a competitive mindset, you know what I mean, you want to get the trophy no matter what. But at some points, you got to be able to put yourself first. So I'm actually really happy to see this happening in football. I'm really happy that players are kind of, having an understanding, or like, I don't know. It seems like it's just a revelation in the sport in general as to the reality of the game versus the things that actually matter. World Series, I mean, Super Bowl trophies obviously matter. Like, players wouldn't be playing this sport. They wouldn't be, spending their entire lives trying to get into the sport if the Super Bowl didn't matter. But, if you can't even remember your Super Bowl win like 5 years after your career because of how much brain damage you have, it doesn't really matter too much, right? So I am pretty happy to see this. And like I said, this is a completely kind of different culture change from what we've seen kind of before in all of sports, right? I mean, like before, mental health has been such a focus point in a lot of sports lately. I know there's something to do with the bell. Don't ask Bell or something like that. I know I totally messed up the hashtag, but something to do with mental health. It's a big thing we see trending with all these sports. So it's pretty cool to see that these players are taking the right steps towards better quality of life, if we're gonna be honest. But I was watching Joe Rogan's podcast actually, and it was Arian Foster, who's a former running back for the Houston Texans. He was a star. He was one of the best running backs in the league. I remember in fantasy, he used to put up so many points. It was absolutely insane. And in that podcast, he had mentioned that if he could go back in time to the day that he stepped on a football field for the very first time, he never would. He said if he could take away every day that he's ever played football, he said he would rather have gone to school and went to college, and got a degree in something else, like something to do with science or something like that. And when Joe Rogan asked him, he's like, dude, you were incredibly successful in football. Like, what would make you want to not live that life? What would make you want to take back every down you've ever played in football? What would make you want to do that? And Arian Foster's looking at the couch, and or looks at the couch. I don't know why. He just looks at Joe Rogan, and he says, I'm in pain. I'm constantly in pain. I wake up every day of my life. I'm just in immediate pain from the day I wake up to the day I go to sleep. I have to take pills. I have to take this because this hurts. And it's like, if you think about it, like if you think about how physical of a sport football is, like we see it on the TV, and it's funny because we just had the playoffs this past weekend, and at one point, I remember like looking at the line of scrimmage right at the very beginning of a play and looking at the collision between the D-line and the O-line. You're talking about some people are taking some hits. That's gotta wear on your body, you know what I mean? You gotta wake up the next day after a game like that, and you're probably not moving very much. Like, that's gotta be terrible. But like I said, these guys have been doing it their whole lives. They're used to this. This is something that, you know what I mean? And these guys have such advanced training staffs that they're able to deal with it. But once you do that for year after year after year after year, and you take hits, and then certain times you take even bigger hits, it's gonna wear on your body. So it's interesting to see a successful former football player kind of come out and say, yeah, I would never do it again just because of the toll that it took on my body. All the glory and all the money, it wasn't worth it, because I'm in pain all the time. So it is quite interesting to see all of this kind of developing, and all of the advancements in into research and into CTE and all injuries that are sports related like this. But it is crazy to see players retiring at such an early kind of stage in their season. But I think the part that's just so different, or the part that's so, I don't even know the right word to describe it. I think the part that makes it so real is just the way that these players are retiring, right? Because they're not just coming out and saying like, man, like I don't want to play anymore. Like I just, whatever. It's like you can see that these players want to play. Like these players definitely want to play. When you're watching Andrew Luck or Luke Kuechly's interviews, when you're watching those, you can tell those players, they want to play so bad. It's just, there's just certain things out there that are a little bit more important. I think a lot about Calvin Johnson, right? Calvin Johnson was, arguably at the time was up and coming, had the possibility of being one of the best receivers in the entire game, if not the best. And he hung it up early too. So it is pretty crazy to see all of this happening. I think this has, if you think about it though, in a lot of ways, this could affect contracts in football, right? Are owners and organizations out there going to be offering these super big contracts to players in their late 20s because, people are retiring at 27, 28, 30, you know what I mean? So it is kind of interesting to see, especially players like Larry Fitzgerald. Larry Fitzgerald's been in the league for how long? Antonio Gates just retired the other day too, and I think he's like 600 years old. So it's kind of crazy the different experiences and the different perspectives that these players have. Some of them, hanging up the cleats at 28 because, my body can't take it anymore. And then you got other people out here that are dinosaurs, that were playing with, chin straps and the leather helmets, and they're still in the league and they're fine. So it's pretty crazy to see how this is all going. But I figured it's a pretty interesting topic. I think it's something that is going to continually grow. It's going to always be a topic of conversation. There's always going to be people, finding ways to make this better. I know there's been so much advancements in the helmets, and we all know watching football nowadays with all the freaking flags for every single flinch you do, they're changing the rules a lot to try and make the game safer. But I mean, at the end of the day, you're talking about a contact tackling sport. You know what I mean? Like, there's gonna be injuries. You're gonna have head injuries. You're gonna have these injuries, and it's all consensual, right? Like, none of these players have a gun against their head and making a play, as Luke Kuechly obviously proved yesterday. So, yeah, I mean, I think right now is an interesting time in the NFL to where we need to kind of realize that you can't just keep doing things the old school way just because of the glory of it all, right? It's the same thing in baseball. This is kind of, side topic, but in baseball, there's a big thing right now where, like, if you hit a home run and you show up the pitcher, you're shamed because it's the old school way. You don't do that. And it's like, you're killing the game because nobody wants to see that. Nobody wants to see a guy hit a home run and then just trot around look, I go, okay, I have to keep my hat down and I have to keep my eyes straight or I don't want to offend anybody, you know what I mean? And it's like, in football now, it's the same thing. I mean, when players are leaving like this, like, I mean, especially with the fans, you see people coming out and like shunning them for it. And it's just like, you got to sometimes change that old school mentality that just because you're retiring at 28 because, you don't want to freaking drool at your mouth when you're in your 40s, you know what I mean, sitting in a wheelchair, and it's just old school mentalities that got to change. But like I said, I thought this was a pretty interesting topic to talk about. Not the longest of podcasts. Oh, you know what, I might as well. We're at 12 minutes. I got about a little bit of time to spare. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about these Boston Red Sox. Right? Kind of we got in a little bit about baseball and the old school culture and stuff like that, which will probably be a topic in a future podcast, by the way. But some interesting news with the Boston Red Sox yesterday. Alex Cora and the Red Sox, and I put quotes around this, air quotes, mutually decided to part ways, which we all know Alex Cora got fired. He got fired because he's a dirty rat. You know what I mean? I mean, if we're going to be real, the Houston Astros in 2017 get their whole punishment or everything, and then the 2018, the guy that was the assistant or bench coach or whatever becomes the manager of the Red Sox, and then out of nowhere these exact same issues come up. So they didn't mutually part ways. Like, Alex Cora was for sure fired. You know what I mean? There's no other way around it. But I mean, they're still going to have to come out with punishments for the organization, so we'll still have to see what that is. But it is officially underway. I mean, Alex Cora is no longer the manager of the Red Sox, you know what I mean? So the dominoes are starting to fall. We'll see what their punishment is. We'll see what happens to them. And then, but the thing is, this is opening up a floodgate for baseball. I mean, this is opening up an absolute floodgate. Teams that are cheating, and including the Dodgers, every other team in baseball, teams that are cheating and getting away with it, they need to stop. Everybody needs to come out and just stop this, because this is already, baseball is going into a decline. Like, baseball is the love of my life, you know what I mean? I love baseball with all my heart, but it's like, when you look at the ratings, you look at like the way people view baseball isn't like the great American pastime anymore. To most people, baseball is just that super slow 3-hour long listening to announcers complain against the game. And this whole cheating thing, you know what I mean? This is like the steroid era all over again, but instead of steroids, we got cameras in center field. It's absolutely ridiculous, but it's got to change. Baseball is way too good of a sport, way too good of an opportunity, you know what I mean, in the sports world. I don't know. It's just really, it's really annoying. You know what I mean? That baseball was finally getting its kind of like upper, you know what I mean? Upper shot on the charts. You know what I mean? With players like Tim Anderson and all of these Ronald Acuna Jr. and all these flashy players. It was kind of like this like breath of life into baseball, and this whole cameras cheating Red Sox, Astros, and whatever other team thing is like. It feels like it's just such a ball and chain, kind of like slowing down that growth in baseball. So I'm really looking forward to kind of get past this whole cheating thing, you know what I mean? But I also want every team that's doing it to be held accountable, including that team in LA. So we'll see how that goes. But as far as that, I mean, I think that's going to go ahead and wrap it up for our second episode of the podcast. If you guys did listen to the whole thing, I really do appreciate it. The first episode actually did really well. We got 50 views, like 6 likes. So thank you guys for that. I appreciate that. That's about it for me today, though, guys. Be ready for, I think on episode 3, I'm actually going to go ahead and talk about I'm going to talk about, like, the Tim Andersons and the flashiness and the old school mentality of baseball and stuff like that, because I do think it's a pretty good topic. So we'll go ahead and talk about that in episode 3. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for tuning in. Wherever you're at in the world, I hope you have a good day or night, and peace, guys.